Hello and welcome back to the No Big Deal podcast with me, Jack Nico, and Jack Fox. We are very excited to welcome our next guest, George Mann from Multiverse. Now, one of George's biggest accomplishments is delivering 9% of revenue for Multiverse from seed to unicorn valuation. Now, George joined as employee number 50 and has seen Multiverse grow to over 1,000 employees from that seed through to Series D. Now, George went on to land the first significant enterprise customer across Big Four, FMCG, public sector, and the media space. George was one of the first major account directors promoted within the company's biggest accounts and 3 of the top 5. George won Wiser Elite's 100 over 100, where over the course of a year and during his time as a major account executive, he consistently held a 300% plus quota attainment. George is now a regional director, leading a newly created mid-market segment, developing the team to deliver the biggest numbers to date through mastering the McMahon, Duggan, and McCluskey playbook. Welcome to No Big Deal, George. Me and Jack are both very excited to have you on.
That's lovely to be here, and that's quite over the top in terms of an introduction, but I know you love a little bit of show business, Jack, so nicely done there.
Love it.
No worries.
I would ask you to just give us a bit of an insight into the deal. Can you tell us, just at the get-go, before you tell us anything technical or tactical about the deal, what this deal did for you in your life?
Yeah, of course. I think like most people who've been in sales for a little bit of time, I've done 1 or 2 deals, but I really isolated on this particular deal because I felt like it was the most formative for me in terms of learning. And I guess a bit of a spoiler alert, it's almost a lesson in how not to do sales. I'm really grateful for it. I'm really grateful for where it turned up in my journey within sales and the lessons that I took from it. So for today, I actually wanted to share a deal that didn't happen. And actually, in reflection, has helped a lot of deals to happen because of the lessons that I took from it.
And also, could you just give us a bit of an insight into what the deal did for you outside of work? Like lessons formative in work, technical and tactical, and the strategy that comes behind signing big enterprise customers. But outside of it, did it have an impact there as well?
Yeah, it did actually. It's a great question. So, yes, I learned a lot of really key bits about our sales playbook and sales in general. I think the thing it really taught me outside of that, though, is around knowing how to regulate in kind of a highly charged environment where you take wins and losses and highs and lows, and actually how to make sure that you're setting yourself up in your personal life as well to enable you to step onto high-performing pitches and to experience both win and loss. So, for instance, the importance of a really strong kind of exercise base, the importance of kind of some good guardrails around sort of personal goals that sit outside of professional goals, so that you're able to, I guess, continue to channel your energy when you are stepping on the pitch in the sales space, but also that you're getting fulfillment in your life outside of just your sales career too. So I think those are the kind of key lessons I took outside of the sales lessons I took from.
Yeah, man, I totally get that.
Yeah, and I like what we've done with this series by allowing guests to talk about deals they've lost, because I think in a lot of scenarios, George, when we prep for this, you learned more from this deal than you probably did from some of the biggest deals that you've closed. And all the anxiety, etc., that comes with losing probably a big deal in a pivotal point in your sales career. So I think to kick us really off, like, what would you say were the top 3 things that you did wrong in this deal, first of all?
I think the first one comes down to champions, and it's a word that we throw around in sales a lot, and I think people mean different things by it. People also hold different standards around actually how strongly they're asking themselves, do I have a champion? What type of champion? Do I know my champion? And am I effectively engaging with my champion? So first, it's around champions. The second, again, it's around kind of strategic pain. So I'm sure we'll go into it, but ultimately making sure the right person understands the strategic pain. Very true of kind of big multinationals, where I think most people know where the fires are, but actually it's finding the right person who wants to put that out. And then the third one, which I think is probably the biggest area of lessons for me, was around execution and kind of poorly guided execution on my part.
Just jumping into that, I feel like execution comes across all three of those, and there's two things that there's questions that come up so regularly. It's like, how do I effectively communicate with my champion? How do I build my champion? And there's like a lot of like really broad sweeping statements. It's like, oh, just go build a champion. Like you just go and talk to your champion and like create them into a champion. And it's actually really not that straightforward. There's a lot of nuance to it and a lot of like tactical expertise that comes over time of like, winning or losing a deal because of a good or bad champion. So could you just tell us a little bit about, in this deal, what the lessons that you learned from about champion building and also like where it went wrong?
Yeah, of course. So I guess one of the dynamics of the deal, very early stages, we'd worked with this organization before very effectively in the UK, and we found ourselves in a position where we're speaking to a member of their global board to look to kind of roll out more widely. And that was effective in terms of getting access to reasonably good EB. And in terms of the champion dynamic, there was an individual who very much had stuck their hand up to be champion in this space of solving this set of challenges. Actually, in fact, it was more stuck his hand up to be able to deliver the solution rather than really actually solving the problem. He'd already done some work in a different geography to help to solve that challenge or indeed deliver that product. But really, if I think back and reflect back, the champion chose us rather than us going to find the champion. And I think that was a really, really big reason why this got to a kind of a really derailed situation and ultimately wasn't something that we wanted.
I was going to say, is that a red flag? Feels like it.
Yeah.
How in this case, George, did the champion find you?
But that's it. And I think when I think about it, definitely like in terms of like outside of like technical sales playbook, right? In terms of actually like internal regulation as a salesperson, very much was driving the deal rather than actually looking at reading the situation, taking a step back and I guess leading with EQ and leading with and figuring out some of the ego that was at play kind of in the deal as well. So absolutely a big red flag. Absolutely one where on paper we had what would be quite a strong EB. We had a great ability to share the effective work we'd done elsewhere in the organisation, but ultimately we were speaking to the wrong person, and we should have known that a lot earlier.
Why was that? Was that due to a lack of influence, or they didn't have a personal goal driver strong enough to push this deal through?
And this is, I guess, where it was like me driving over actually kind of taking that moment to step back and think about like ego in the room. So ego in the room says someone has gone and delivered something in another market from this individual, effectively delivered something in another market, and was being roped in by a global board member to look to roll out that same offering elsewhere. And so was really focused on the product that he effectively had built that was almost like a rival to our product, if you like. It was almost an in-house solution to what we were looking to, the problem set we would deliver to with our out-house solution. And so actually was an enemy.
That champion then, that champion almost attached himself to jeopardize.
Oh my God, I love it. Yeah,
nice.
It's so Littlefinger.
I've never heard of it. I suppose as well now, what you need to understand, George, as well, is I know you're obviously a big medpic house at Multiverse, and we have a lot of guests on that use that sales qualification. Me and Jack are big advocates of it as well. When you look at qualifying champions with your reps in deals at the moment, what are the things that you, one, coach them on, or two, look for to know they have a champion or they have a coach?
Yeah, exactly. So, and by the way, coach is not always a pejorative term if you've qualified someone as a coach, and I guess the different flavors. And I guess I can share some of the kind of almost kind of tick box qualification that you want to do as standard, but then there's also an element of being kind of an inquisitive, EQ hungry individual to actually get a sense of kind of the lay of the land as well, which I think is partly where I fell down here. But let me talk through, I guess, some of the basic qualifications. So looking at kind of three core elements of, does this individual have the seniority to go and do X or Y and to drive this initiative forward? Do they have the authority to do so as well? So, how are they seen by their peers, for instance? And then finally, do they have the attitude? So just because someone's senior, just because they are respected, and they've got the power to, in theory, by their job title, it doesn't mean that actually they wake up every morning thinking, I'm going to go and solve big problems. And so those are kind of some of the very basic, I guess, characteristics of a champion. And then we talk about champions of the pain, champions of our product, and then also champions of the reps individually, or champions of you as well. So those are,
we've heard that one before, haven't we, Jack?
those are very commonplace qualification, but I think they are really important bread and butter. And like some of those, I think are probably a little bit overlooked as well here. But I can go into, I guess, where I think the big overlooks happened, if that's helpful.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So that's almost kind of ground one, right? That's like your framework, which helps to simplify an otherwise kind of really complex world. And I think you have to go beyond kind of painting by numbers, and also do the level of thinking about actually like what's really at play here for this individual. What am I sensing in the room? Things like, I guess, simple questions of, would I bet my house that this person is going to do this and this is going to get done with this person? And are my spider senses saying there's something otherwise, even if I've qualified on those kind of two areas that we spoke about, and you've come through with kind of yeses, or actually needs to qualify further, but still there's kind of tingling feeling of this person just gives me a sense that they, for some reason, are saying all the right things, but actually there's something fishy going on here. And I think when you're an individual who's thinking about a number, when you're an individual who's looking to go and do ambitious things, and likes to kind of, wants to go out and deliver an ambitious forecast, and on paper it feels good, it's really easy to think, wow, on paper, look how good this looks. I've got a champion because I've gone through those qualification funnels we just talked about. But actually, if you kind of take a step back and really think about that feeling of something doesn't quite feel right here, and then trying to understand what that is, I think you have to do that level of qualification, which almost comes down to being a human being, right?
Do you know what? I was actually going to go back to what you said at the start about what this deal taught you about outside of work, about how to have like guardrails and exercise routine. That really gets you in tune with your gut. That is where there's like something that's quite intangible feeling, where you think like, oh, I can tick all the boxes here on paper, but like my gut is telling me that I've just woke up this morning and think I don't really trust this person to be my champion anymore and go to bat for me. And you can't really, I guess you can teach that, but you can't teach it in a spreadsheet of like qualification.
No, exactly. I guess you can think of it in two ways, right? You can think of it as step one is kind of just religiously staying against those qualification funnels and consistently stress testing against them. The other way is to think about actually, stress test them in a really binary way, as well as kind of overlaying them with what your sense is as well. Yeah, obviously, if you're getting no's from that first step of qualification, then you've got no's. Like, you should never look beyond that. But if you're getting yeses, but still something not right, then kind of trust yourself as a human being.
I got a quick
and go find out what that is.
About this as well. When you're qualifying your deals and you're building so let's say you're building your yearly number up as an enterprise seller or mid-market seller, do you build your deals around champions? Like, do you think over there I got a good champion, I'm going to go and build my deal around that? Or do you look at a deal and you think I can really solve that company's problem and I need to go and find a champion there? I hope that question makes sense, but do you look at it one way or the other?
Yeah, and this goes to almost that second lesson I was sharing, right, which was around pain, and it's almost the interaction between 1 and 2, which is champion and pain. So I guess what I've been teaching my team to do is to really think about time as almost like golden tokens at sort of the sales casino. So it really comes down to, if you've got so many hours in a day, say, I don't know, 9 golden tokens or 8, and each representing an hour, like, where are you going to place those to actually deliver most value? Yes, to our organization, but also through the organizations you're partnering with. And so it probably is a bit of a combination of which are the industries or companies, sectors that have the most significant challenges is always step 1. Step 2, and obviously ones that we can answer to, right? If there's stuff that sits out where our product can help, then actually semi-relevant. Step 2 being, well, who are the people who really care about solving those challenges within those organizations, and, you know, against some of those qualifications we talked about earlier in terms of what a champion looks like. And then I guess thirdly is how are you then going to be able to demonstrate to them that we're the organization who can make that happen, and why they're going to pick up the phone to you when you pick up the phone.
I like the Casino 9 tokens. I think it's a really good way of, I think, do you know what? It's interesting going from like an SDR role to an account executive role, which presumably pretty much all 3 of us have done. You can be so much more strict as an SDR doing a more monotonous job on your time management than in like an account executive or even a sales director, because every week you go into, it's all different. You've got calls all over the place. So I love the way of framing like each hour as a token. Where are you going to spend your time? Are you going to spend it in a deal review on one of your big deals? Are you going to spend it prospecting into other accounts? I think that's really good advice. I think if we go back a stage,
sorry,
as well,
Jack, I'll jump in. I'll jump in on that as well to give you almost kind of another layer of thinking on top of just the hours. Is actually, and I've spoken about this once or twice before, and I definitely talked to my team about it. In fact, I've talked to them a lot about it this week as we're kind of in the kind of final key selling week of the quarter, which is at different points in the quarter, you think about your tokens in different ways. So at the start of a fiscal, or maybe in the last few weeks of your fiscal, if you're in good shape, you start to think of your coins in like a year. In your final kind of weeks, in your closing weeks, you think about your time in terms of hours. And then at different points, you'll be thinking of it in different spans. So you'll be focusing your time in different ways. So for instance, at the start of the quarter, you might be thinking in kind of half-day slots of, okay, great, we're partnering with this organization, and we've kind of committed to a three-month timeline of what we're going to be doing. So I'm actually going to come into your office for half a day, and I'm going to meet most of your execs. We're going to go through maybe turn up in a leadership meeting at some point in that day. Before that, you'll have sort of champion huddles, and you might also start to have conversations with kind of individuals you haven't yet met who will be important as part of the process, and we'll see some of the benefit and the value that you'll be delivering through partnership. And then off the back of that kind of key crunchy bigger meeting, you might also then spend some time sort of debriefing, etc. But ultimately, you're thinking in terms of days and half days with a view of sort of 3 months, and then you're kind of changing that to hours as you're probably in those sort of closing motions within your quarter. Or that's how I articulate that coin. So yes, it can represent an hour. It could also represent a bit more.
I love that, and it comes back to the third point you said at the beginning. You said the 3 learnings were champion implicating strategic pain and execution. Going back to the deal, can you tell us a little bit about how execution across those 2 areas, and particularly in terms of time management, which I'm assuming you probably spun your wheels and wasted some time on this.
But anyway, how the execution on this deal, I'll finish it.
There was kind of an internal irony that was a question about execution, and he was halfway through the words X as the Wi-Fi drops.
Am I back?
But hey, it's on message, so that's all good. So yeah, for sure, I think we got a load of folks into the deal very early doors, and to the point where actually it was probably to our detriment, because there were just so many voices there, without one clear individual who's sticking their hand up who's the right person to also be the champion, or some of the key champions there. So a lot of people, broadly the wrong people, and also got to the EB very early and spent quite a bit of time with the EB, who I think also we weren't doing a good enough job of delivering value to that EB through those interactions early doors to earn the right to get to the right champions, actually, I think is my reflection. So executionally, I think lack of kind of control of sort of almost sequencing of those kind of early sort of qualification disco type motion and sort of scoping before going into like full proposal mode. I think like secondly as well was just that the urgency was not there in terms of like clear like directional commitment on almost like a sort of week by week basis. Again, at this stage, we were looking more at week by week. What steps are we going to be taking? And I don't think we drove enough clarity. And that's as at that point as an AE, right? That's on my shoulders. I'm a quarterback of the deal. I was really fortunate to have kind of one of our leaders on the product side, CRO, and then kind of some really good support across our CS team as well, all helping us get into these conversations, all helping us in that early stage of the deal. But ultimately, as quarterback, wasn't giving the clarity across my internal team, so they're ready to step into those meetings to deliver value, but also on the external piece where with the customer really wasn't spending time figuring out what those simple steps were each week to make progress that was valuable progress with their support.
Do you know what, as well, this is a super hot topic for me and my also colleagues in my team at Sales Loft, because we had our QBRs yesterday and one of my colleagues shared that with his forecasting, what ended up happening was all of his deals ended up just being done on the end of the month. And he was like, I think in hindsight, looking back, when I was doing my mutual plans, they weren't mutual. They were my plan to get the deal done by the end of the quarter. So I suppose for you, George, in your experience, mutual action plans for me, correct me, or you can disagree, are intrinsically tied to the urgency of the deal. How do you present your mutual action plans and make sure they are mutual and it's not just you going, we're going to do this and this and whatever?
I think, if I'm honest, if you're getting to a point of mutual action plan, you should already have the urgency. So that urgency piece doesn't come from a mutual action plan to I guess my definition of it. It really comes from going back to, I guess, the first 2 points I spoke about.
Implicate pain.
Exactly. So understanding from an individual, like, are you really seriously feeling this challenge, this pain? Like, what does that mean for you? What does that feel like on a daily basis? How's that turning up? And then what's the impact of that? And how does that really kind of ladder up to, strategic, organizational wide like value? So you don't understand that, then you can have as many kind of mutual action plans as you like, but you're not going to get the urgency. You're not going to get the drive, right? So I think that first piece. The second is like, well, there's probably like thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe of individuals in your organization. And why are you the person who wants to fix this? Why are you the person who wants to put their name against this? What's it actually going to mean for you? So we kind of call that like personal, sort of professional wins, but ultimately it's understanding what other people's motivations are and drivers. Going back to, I guess, some of the comments I made earlier about kind of, I guess, turning up as a human, and kind of reading your champions. So I guess if you've got an understanding of those two things, then actually you should have the urgency. Then it's a case of, well, how do you then direct that urgency to be most effective, removing kind of risks as you want to move forward. Once you've got those two things are kind of almost like the fuel and the spark. Then it's about which way you're going to point the car as it goes off, or rocket, if you like, because we are obviously in rocket ship territory. Right?
This is SAS. This is SAS.
There
you know
go.
what's interesting about that? Going back to that human element, it takes being on the end of someone else's mutual action plan, if it isn't mutual, to recognize how bullshit they are. Like, I had someone do it to me when I was buying my...
I was about to say, it feels like we're about to hear a story of pain.
Yeah.
But not the right type of pain.
It happened to me when I was...
To be honest, Jack normally every episode does share a story. Would you clip these? It's like a full
me complaining about other
Jack
salespeople is what it actually is. There's a catalogue of that. He's like, I'm going through the process of buying a house, and like the
That's
estate
painful.
agent
That
was
is
putting me
painful.
on their timeline, and I was like, I also have a timeline. You just haven't asked me it, and it was actually quicker than yours. But you're telling me about this, and this, and I was like, this is bullshit. I actually don't want to have to talk to you about this again. And it really felt like I wasn't heard, and I just wanted to be like, listen to me, please listen to me, and I'll tell you where to go.
I don't know if I'm allowed to carry on this going down a detour here, or
Please
if I
do,
get
yeah.
it's
No,
okay.
yeah, you
Okay,
can tour wherever you want.
rein me in if I'm
Mate.
carrying on going in 20 minutes time, huh? But like, yeah, a year ago, I fortunate to, I guess, grab my first little place, and one of the things that struck me, there's two things that really strike me about buying a house that, as a sales professional, I find just so bizarre. First is that as a buyer, you actually have to be the seller. You have to sell your credentials as the buyer. And the amount of times that I had to do that, I actually had probably a better talk track about why I was a better buyer at that point than actually in that quarter. Some of the talk tracks for my customers about why we should launch our partnerships. But that's by the by. I just find that so bizarre. Can you imagine if our customers came up pitching themselves like, no, Jack, we really should buy from you because X, Y, and Z. It would just be such a weird world. And the second one is as a professional seller, you're inquisitive. You're trying to understand, and you're trying to get to the root of things. I don't think anyone asked me. I met 10 estate agents at least. Why are you buying a house?
Thank you. No one's asked. They say, how many bedrooms you want, what areas you want to be in. I'm like, all right, cool, basic. That's like asking me what tech stack I've got. Like, get me to the real bit. I'll tell you where I am, why I'm moving, what I need from it. Do you know what? Our old sales enablement guy used to tell this amazing story about when he was trying to buy aircon. And he used to say, I need aircon that turns on really fast and gets my house cold fast. And one guy was like, oh, yeah, cool, I can get you that. It turns on in 30 minutes. And then he finally found this one aircon provider who said, oh, you don't need it to turn on really fast. You need it to turn on when you're within 500 meters from your house. And I was like, that is the best version of that story ever. Like, do some discovery and sell me a different feature, which I actually need. Because I want that. As soon as I get within 500 meters, I've got that now. I've got Hive. When I'm 500 meters away from the house, my Hive turns on, which segue.
Gee, sort of joining the dots, I think that's a really valuable sort of example to call out because it actually links into probably what it felt like when I turned up to this person in this deal that we absolutely, I absolutely did not achieve what I wanted to from it because I turned up with my action plan with everything on paper, showing that we were kind of green lights and green flags, not too many red flags, really scratching the surface. I just didn't listen. Like the drive was there, but the step back, the thinking about the egos in the room, thinking about, the personal professional wins of champions, the types of dynamics, like were they really a champion or were they a bit of a coach, a bit of a fox in the room? Just exactly like that estate agent experience that I think some people have.
Yeah. Can you tell us at this point then, when the deal kind of came apart and you knew like, oh, this is lost now, can you tell us about that moment and also what the biggest that moment of learning was for you, where you're like, that was the foot that I put in the wrong place? Like,
yeah. So I think hopefully by now you've got a sense that there wasn't like a moment where I was like, I put my foot wrong here. I think from top to bottom, I did a like impressively average, if not poor job, which is
actually, George, would counteract that. And I think as a junior sales rep or someone with 1 or 2 years experience, I would look at the deal that you had on face value. You had what you thought was a champion who had ulterior motives. You had senior exec alignment. You thought you had urgency. You had a lot of the things, but I think you didn't qualify them hard enough.
Yeah, and I think probably almost that was some of the first. So that was probably one of my first quarters, sort of really trying to get to grips with kind of medic and a lot of the playbook and a lot of the things that obviously so fortunate to have learned from, Steve and Jeremy and et al. And Al as well. And I guess it's almost like when a playbook hits reality, it's actually understanding how to almost translate that into the real world, and that's probably almost the gap. And you're right, that bridge really it was around qualifying hard on what those things were. And unfortunately, there wasn't like a big Hollywood moment where I realised, oh no, Titanic's sinking, as much as 3 weeks of chasing to try and kind of get the next meeting in, and it just wasn't happening. And then we got a little bit of an email note saying, hey, I think we're taking this in a different direction. So the next meeting, we'd agreed what we'd cover, and true to kind of that third pillar of lesson around execution. I hadn't got it in at the end of the meeting, which is normally, again, something that I drill into my team, and it's actually been one of the big areas that have enabled us to have a lot of success quite early doors, was never leave a meeting without kind of getting a really meaningful next step. If you can't get a meaningful next step, don't chuck time in someone's diary. No one likes that. Jack, I'm not going to let you come in with a story there of aggrievement, but ultimately, no one likes people chucking time in their diary unless it's a meaning. But like, make sure where you can, you're getting that almost. You just diarise it in the meeting, and that enables urgency and momentum, as we kind of talked about as well, Jack. Right? But yeah, we got to that stage, and then I guess a long period of reflection, because that was probably one of the most significant opportunities. Pardon me. One of the most significant opportunities I had the opportunity to look at that stage. Learned so much. Still really grateful for it. Still pains me a little bit, as a semi-proud competitive individual, but so much better for it.
Let's talk about then, and thanks for sharing that story. First of all, we've learned, how have you put those learnings into action now? And can you give any tangible examples of where it's worked?
Of course. So my team will quite consistently tell you that when I ask the question of do you have a champion, I won't ask them once in the same sentence. So do you have a champion? You do. Okay. Do you really have a champion? Like do you? And then you get. Do you have a champion? Yes. Do you really have a champion? Yeah. There's a bit of a tone difference there. What are you uncertain about? And then often it will go back to, I guess, those early stage qualification around actually their attitude or their authority, seniority. Sometimes those things will be in a good place, but it still doesn't quite feel like they're the right person, and that's where we kind of have that fuller conversation. It's quite an easy conversation if we figure out actually their attitude is not the kind of attitude you want to bet your house on, and therefore we need to go and find someone who does have the right attitude to look to get something done. So that's the first one. It's just really qualifying super hard on champion. Yes, against qualification, but also on gut as well. If everything is yes on qualification, but something still doesn't quite feel right.
In the champion qualification you did, and we learned this from Jake last time, they're like a champion of you, the brand that you're selling for, or solving the problem. What you added on top of that was an extra layer of 1, seniority, 2, authority, or 3, attitude. Do you quantify those in a 1 to 4 score?
No, I think it's pretty binary, right? So if I guess there's different categories of champion you'd probably want to think about. So product champion, someone who sits over the solution or elements of the solution, who you kind of want to rubber stamp against. It's a business champion who sits over the business outcomes that are looking to be delivered, or indeed kind of the challenges that are looking to be solved, the business challenges. And ultimately, kind of on your biz champ, you want all 3 of those things, right? It doesn't matter how senior they are. If they're not going to have the authority to get things done, they don't have maybe the attitude to want to turn up and to put their name to things and to solve problems and to kind of work with their colleagues to achieve things, then they're not a champion. So you want all 3 really. And so it's binary in that respect.
I love the way that you guys at Multiverse talk about how binary medic qualification is. It's really unique to your business. The people that obviously do, there's obviously other organisations that speak in such a binary format about it, but the way I've spoken to many people who work at your company treat it is very black and white. And obviously there's nuance to a lot of things in champion building as well, but the way you can get it down to such granular detail, you really can make it quite binary after a while. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the value of it across a team, right? Is that we are all speaking a shorthand language that we can speak to very, very quickly in what is and what can be very complex, fast-moving, high-pressured situations. So, if you think about how can you develop very quickly as a rep, well, being around other people who are all using kind of a really clear playbook that has been demonstrated as being successful over a very, very long period of time, as well as in, I guess, our environment and our teams. It supercharges learning, and it makes it then really easy for other people to digest that learning too, and to think about it like that. I guess part of the sentiment that I was sharing up top around qualifying on champions and then going one step further around the gut and the human instinct, I can touch a bit more on that because I think it goes beyond the binary
that's the
piece.
Gray area.
But
That's
I don't
the
know.
grey area nuance I was talking about. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually inspired by a book I've been reading about the future commercialization of cricket, which is a little bit off the beaten track in terms of, I guess, the topic of today. But it talks a lot about professional sports teams. And I guess, particularly in cricket, like step one has always been like professionalization of the space in terms of where are the gains to be had in this space. So step one has been professionalization of the space. So the sports space, that's, starting to get nutritionists, starting to get people who are then like, PTs, really kind of strength and conditioning, etc. Those were the big gains in sport kind of 30 to 20 years ago. The next step is, and we've seen this definitely like in series like the IPL and actually across all sports as well, is the use of data to make great decisions. And that's been something that's been really game-changing in terms of things like team selection, monitoring fitness, knowing when to sub your players because of heart rates, etc., etc. In cricket, around like run rates in the shortened format of the game. In rugby, about like predicted scores and therefore whether you should be going for tries or drop goals, given we've just had the World Cup go past. All kinds of manifestations of using data as the cutting edge. And there's a lot of conversation about now, well, it's almost a level playing field around like that professionalism piece, because everyone's kind of in one way or another eating the right things, doing the right amount of exercise. It's almost a level playing field in terms of data. Some people probably have a bit of an edge, but ultimately most sports teams are looking to do that, serious ones. And so that next area of kind of real big development is around like psychology and the mindset of being in those environments and how you actually unlock the best performance, given you've made the right decisions because of the data, and ultimately you've got people to the peak of where their potential could be. It's then how do they then actualize that potential that you've verified also with data. And I think that's kind of true in terms of where we are in terms of, I guess, an industry in a space, which is there are some really strong codifications of playbook and medic, and actually using data there, as well as like professionalizing, like first of all, professionalizing as a space. Secondly, having a really clear playbook that gives us data, that gives us kind of a really clear binary guide that's almost scientific. And almost that next step of evolution is once you've mastered that, actually, how do you self-regulate as a person? How do you self-regulate as a person helping someone else to make a decision? Ultimately, that's kind of sales. And so I think there's a really interesting piece there that there isn't really grey areas in terms of the playbook if you're applying it truly. But the next step of unlocking potential sits in actually how you're able to execute in those big moments.
Is anyone...
And how you're able... Sorry, Karen.
You finish sentence.
Yeah, and how you're able to then unlock that kind of peak performance really consistently through mindset.
Is there anyone in your life helping you do that at the moment?
Oof, that's a massive question. Yeah, I mean, I've got a very, very good friend from the industry, well, few, who we sit down on a monthly basis and kind of hold each other accountable, but on a daily basis, I guess starting to journal and affirmations as well.
Nice, I love it. In that remit, no. Jack used to work for Ollie, and I work for Ollie Sharp now. I'm sure you know. Mm-hmm. He is like a shining light of like helping people self-regulate, and he does do it. We do it regularly. We meet once a week, but we also we talk about deals. Like, so it's not like we're constantly talking about how to self-regulate. But he's taught me that over a period of time. But my partner she's a therapist. So I get the benefit of understanding that language and having reflective conversations with her at the end of the day, which I can't tell you has helped me untold in my sales career, because I'm like able to deal with, like, sometimes I feel like, whoa, the anxiety is really high. And she's like, all right, well, here's how you can manage it like this. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, the excitement's really high, or sometimes I'm like, the lows are really low. And that's how you can regulate. Like, I've got a big demo. I've got 7 stakeholders coming. I've got to coordinate 4 people on my side. I've got to self-regulate. And this is how you can help do it with. Yeah, I just think it's interesting. I think you're right. I think we can get to the point where we can have all the best technology in SaaS. We can have all the best playbooks in SaaS. We can have all the best qualification processes. And then the next part is like, how do you bring to life the human element of it at its peak and perform throughout the seasonality of a fiscal year? I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's really. Yeah, I agree.
Do you know what? Add to that before we continue, like the extra bit is, for me, what I've added on is having my Whoop this year. And I feel like being able to hone in on the data, being like, how are you exercising? Are you exercising when you should be exercising? Are you sleeping well? When should you be sleeping? When you can get those like really human caveman basic things down, I perform then better in what I'm being paid to do, which is like my job. And then it's mad how many different things you can.
And if you think of those 3 pillars, right, they interact, which is what you've just described, because the Whoop sits in the middle bucket of data, and then it goes back down to the professionalization piece, and then probably goes then back up into psychology too. And that was, I guess, the closing thought on this one from me, which is that 3rd bucket, I guess I just shared about, actually is very largely addressed if you've got a great playbook, you've got great development about how to you absorb that playbook and then how to execute on it, because it removes so much uncertainty and enables you then to have that, like one of the 5 topics I journal on is load. And what I mean by that is like cognitive load. And it removes so much of that cognitive load because it gives so much simplicity that you're then free to kind of go and execute. And I know that, again, I'm going to use one more sports analogy. One of the reasons why, the likes of Hamilton's one of the best F1 drivers is that he's able, yes, he's firing around corners at 200 plus miles an hour or whatever crazy speed it is, but he still has the headspace while he's doing that because he's so cognitively clear about what that is, so much muscle memory, so much clarity that he can think through pit stop strategies 15 laps away with other dynamic kind of moving parts in terms of other drivers. And it's similar in terms of stepping into those big sales moments where you've got a simple, clear playbook. You've got a leader who knows it, who's stepping into those meetings with you, that you can then simply go and execute. And you've got that cognitive space to go and do just a brilliant job and do what you signed a sales contract to go and do, which is to do a great job by selling.
Hey,
we're sounding like the high performance podcast now.
George, that was class, mate. I think I actually think that's really insightful. I think that's the art of management as well. It comes down to how well you can influence other people to develop that in themselves. So if there are any vacancies in your team at the moment, I think there's going to be some lucky applicants out there, mate. I really appreciate your time. Coming up to the end, I don't want to overrun just in case you guys are busy. But so I just want to say thank you, mate. That was brilliant. Very insightful. Great learning for me. I'm assuming, Jack, you probably feel the same.
Yeah, it's been great to have you on. Thank you, George. I know how much of a heavy hitter you are in our specific sort of SaaS marketplace in London. So very excited to have you on and share this with everyone.
No, thanks for having me.
So
and sneakily, I had in my back pocket someone who I might want to recommend and give them some red cheeks and blushing, if
please.
that's okay.